Have you ever wanted to say something so precise, so powerful, that the other person just goes completely silent? Not with shouting, not with insults, not with aggression, but with pure intelligence. Imagine being in the middle of a difficult conversation and with just one sentence, making the other person lower their voice, look at you differently, and have nothing more to say. Today I'm going to reveal 5 smart responses so incredibly powerful that when you use them, they will silence anyone. It doesn't matter if you're talking to your boss, a difficult family member, or someone who simply wants to impose their will on you. These responses work everywhere because they tap into fundamental human psychology. And here's the best part. These phrases not only protect you, they also place you in a position of power without losing your calm or your dignity. Pay very close attention because response number 3, if used correctly, can disarm even the most skilled manipulator. Stay with me until the end because you're going to want to practice every single one. And when you apply them, you will notice the silence. Everyone at some point has felt that frustration. You're saying something logical, valid, necessary, but the other person simply isn't listening. And worse, they seem to be winning not because they're right, but because they shout louder, interrupt faster, or attack more aggressively. In our modern culture, strength is often associated with volume and domination, conviction with imposition, and respect with fear. But that isn't real respect, it's momentary domination. And true power isn't about imposing your will on others. It's about expressing yourself with such clarity and control that the other person has no choice but to listen. Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to Stoic Ocean and hit that notification bell, because what I'm about to share will transform how you communicate forever. These aren't just phrases, they're strategic tools for emotional intelligence and personal power. When you master them, you'll notice something magical. People will start listening more, arguing less, and treating you with a new level of respect. Because real communication mastery isn't about winning arguments, it's about mastering yourself. And that's exactly what these 5 responses will help you do. Each one is designed for a specific situation, each one is backed by ancient wisdom, and each one works because it changes the dynamic of the conversation completely. Are you ready to discover how to silence anyone with just your words? Let's begin with response number 1. Before we continue, I want to hear from you. What's the most difficult conversation you've had recently? Share in the comments below, because understanding your challenges helps me create better content for our growing community. Now let's dive into the first smart response that will change everything. Response 1. I don't need to raise my voice to be right. There are moments in life when someone raises their voice, believing it gives them more authority and power. They shout, they interrupt, they impose themselves, and they expect you to do exactly the same. They want you to enter their chaos, to match their intensity, to play their game. But if you fall into that trap, you've already lost. This phrase is your elegant escape. It's your sophisticated way to step out of the noise without leaving the conversation. Imagine you're in a meeting, a family discussion, or even a conversation on the street. The other person raises their tone, trying to dominate the entire atmosphere. Their voice gets louder, their body more aggressive, their energy more confrontational. And you, instead of responding with the same fire, instead of matching their emotional intensity, you maintain complete control. You breathe. You look them directly in the eyes with calm confidence, and you say those powerful words, I don't need to raise my voice to be right. The effect is immediate. The effect is powerful. This phrase doesn't just stop their attack. It sends a clear message that changes everything. You're telling them you don't play on the field of emotional confrontation. You play on the field of mental dominance. You don't compete with volume. You compete with clarity. You don't compete with aggression. You compete with wisdom. In that instant, the person listening realizes something has fundamentally changed. You're no longer arguing. You're leading. The entire dynamic shifts. They came expecting a fight, but you gave them wisdom. They came expecting conflict, but you gave them control. They came expecting chaos, but you gave them clarity. Marcus Aurelius taught us that self-control is not repression, it is real strength. He understood that whoever controls themselves controls a situation, and that's exactly what you're demonstrating with this response. You're showing them that true power doesn't come from being louder, it comes from being clearer. True authority doesn't come from dominating others, it comes from mastering yourself. Let me give you a real workplace example. Your boss calls you into meeting. He's upset about a project. His voice is elevated, his tone accusatory, his energy threatening. Other team members are sitting there silently, afraid to speak. Everyone expects you to either apologize profusely or get defensive. Instead, you maintain calm posture. You speak in measured tones. You say, "I understand your concerns, and I don't need to raise my voice to address them effectively." Suddenly, the entire room changes. Your boss pauses, his energy shifts. He realizes you're not intimidated. You're not defensive. You're professional. You're in control. The respect in room immediately shifts toward you. Other team members notice your calm strength. They see someone who cannot be shaken by emotional storms. Here's another example. You're having dinner with family members, politics comes up. One uncle starts shouting, making aggressive statements, trying to force his views on everyone. Others get uncomfortable. Some start arguing back. The atmosphere becomes tense. Instead of engaging in the shouting match, you wait for a pause. Look at him calmly and say, "I don't need to raise my voice to have valid points." Watch what happens. He might continue shouting for a moment, but everyone else has heard your wisdom. They see the contrast between his chaos and your control. They notice who has real strength and who just has volume. The conversation often changes direction. People start listening more to your measured responses than to his emotional outbursts. This works because it taps into fundamental human psychology. When someone raises their voice, they're trying to compensate for weakness in their argument. They believe volume can substitute for validity, but deep down, everyone knows that truth doesn't need shouting. Wisdom doesn't need aggression. Logic doesn't need intimidation. By maintaining your calm, you're highlighting their emotional weakness without ever saying it directly. You're letting them expose themselves through their own behavior. The beauty of this response is its versatility. It works with bosses, with colleagues, with family members, with friends, even with strangers. Because it's not about being confrontational, it's about being principled. It's not about winning arguments, it's about maintaining dignity. It's not about dominating others, it's about mastering yourself. Epictetus said, "He who cannot control his tongue will be a slave to his emotions." This response shows you've achieved that mastery. You control your tongue, so you control your emotions, so you control the situation. Practice this response. Feel the power of speaking softly while carrying tremendous authority. Notice how people lean in to hear you when you refuse to shout. Watch how they respect you when you refuse to be intimidated. See how they follow your lead when you refuse to engage in chaos. This isn't just a communication technique. This is a life philosophy. This is the wisdom of ancient Stoics applied to modern conversations. This is your path to becoming someone who commands respect without demanding attention, who influences others without raising their voice, who leads effectively without creating chaos. You don't need to shout because your logic is enough. You don't need to impose because your confidence is enough. You don't need to dominate because your character is enough. That's the power of this first response. That's the beginning of your journey to communication mastery. But we're just getting started. Wait until you see what response number 2 can do for you. Response 2. The way you speak says more about you than it does about me. When someone attacks you with sarcasm, mockery, or contempt, the most tempting response is to fight fire with fire, to match their tone, to mirror their disrespect, to give them taste of their own medicine. But that's where most people lose. That's where you gain your greatest advantage. This phrase is like a perfectly clean mirror. It doesn't respond with violence. It doesn't defend with desperation. It doesn't attack with aggression. It simply reflects what other person is showing them. The way you speak says more about you than it does about me. With just these words, you deactivate the venom in their attack because you're not insulting them back. You're not seeking their approval. You're not accepting their game. You're simply holding up a mirror to their behavior. Imagine you're in a professional setting. A colleague makes a sarcastic comment about your work in front of others. They try to undermine you, to embarrass you, to make themselves look better. Everyone in the room waits for your reaction. They expect you to get defensive, to argue back, to create drama. Instead, you look at your colleague calmly, pause for effect, and say those powerful words. The way you're speaking says more about you than it does about me. Watch what happens. The entire room shifts. Your colleague feels weight of their own words. They hear themselves through your mirror. Other team members see your emotional intelligence. They respect your maturity. They notice who's professional and who's not. Here's another powerful example. You're at social gathering. Someone makes a hurtful comment about your choices, your appearance, or your beliefs. They try to provoke you, to get emotional reaction, to create entertainment at your expense. Instead of retaliating, instead of defending yourself, instead of getting upset, you maintain composure. You smile slightly, look them in the eyes and say calmly, "How you're speaking right now reveals more about your character than it does about mine." Suddenly, they're exposed. Their attempt to dominate through aggression has backfired. They wanted to show your weakness, but they ended up revealing their own. This works because it changes the script. They came expecting an emotional reaction, but you gave them wisdom. They came expecting a defensive response, but you gave them reflection. They came expecting drama, but you gave them truth. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike the person who performed the injury." This response is perfect embodiment of that principle. You not only maintain your peace, you force other person to confront their own disrespect without you ever saying anything negative about them. You're letting their behavior speak for itself. The psychological power of this response is extraordinary. When someone attacks you, they're trying to transfer their negative energy onto you. They want you to carry their emotional burden. By reflecting their behavior back to them, you're refusing that transfer. You're saying, "I see what you're doing, but I won't participate in your negativity." This response is particularly effective in workplace because it's professional, it's non-confrontational, yet it's incredibly powerful. Your boss criticizes you in an unfair way. Instead of arguing, you say, Your approach to feedback says more about your leadership style than my performance. They can't argue with that observation. They can't punish you for stating truth. They can only reflect on their own behavior. Family situations are where this shines even more brightly. A relative makes disrespectful comments about your life choices. Instead of fighting, you say, "The way you talk about my decisions reveals more about your values than mine." The beauty is they can't argue with your observation because you're not attacking them. You're just holding up a mirror to their behavior. Epictetus taught us, it's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. And this teaching has incredible depth, because what truly defines your character and the respect others offer you is not what you experience, but how you respond to what you experience. In the context of personal attacks, that means one thing very clearly. You don't need to shout to win, you need to respond with precision. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and philosopher, ruled an entire empire without losing his composure. And he didn't do it because he was weak. He did it because he knew that whoever controls themselves controls the situation. His serenity was his weapon. His self-control was his power. Today we live in a world that rewards quick reactions, impulsive opinions, and hurtful responses. But whoever learns to respond with intelligence becomes an anomaly, someone memorable. And that's the kind of person others listen to, even when they disagree. Seneca said, "To speak in anger is like shooting an arrow without aiming." A thoughtless phrase can destroy a relationship, close a door, or make you lose the respect that was so hard to earn. Therefore, what you're learning now are not phrases to humiliate others. They are tools to defend your dignity with elegance, to set boundaries without violence, and to make even your harshest critics fall silent. Because when you speak with clarity, calm, and confidence, you're no longer arguing, you're leading. You're demonstrating the kind of strength that doesn't need validation from others. You're showing them that true power comes from within, not from dominating those around you. This response is your way of saying, "I see through your attempts to provoke me, and I choose not to play." It's your declaration of emotional independence. It's your statement of personal sovereignty. It's your demonstration of character strength. Practice this response until it becomes second nature. Until you can say it with absolute calm, with complete confidence, with unwavering dignity. Watch how people start treating you differently. Watch how they become more careful with their words around you. Watch how they begin to respect your boundaries without you ever having to demand it. That's the power of this second response. That's the next level of your communication mastery. But wait until you see what response number 3 can do for you, especially when dealing with master manipulators. This one is going to change how you handle toxic people forever. Response 3. Help me understand what you mean by that. This might be the most powerful phrase in your entire arsenal, especially when dealing with master manipulators, narcissists, or anyone who uses confusion as weapon. Manipulators thrive on ambiguity. They love vague accusations, subtle threats, and unclear expectations. They want you confused, second-guessing yourself, and constantly seeking their clarification. But when you say, "Help me understand what you mean by that," you're not asking for clarification. You're handing them back their own confusion. You're forcing them to be specific. You're demanding clarity instead of accepting chaos. Watch how this works in real situations. Imagine someone says, "People are saying things about you," or "Everyone knows you're not reliable," or "I'm just concerned about your attitude." These are classic manipulation tactics. They're vague, they're threatening, They're designed to make you defensive and uncertain. Instead of defending yourself, instead of asking what people, instead of getting emotional, you remain calm, look them directly and say, "Help me understand what you mean by that." Suddenly, the entire dynamic shifts. They can't hide behind vague accusations anymore. They have to be specific. They have to name names. They have to provide examples. They have to articulate exactly what they mean. And most manipulators can't do that because their power comes from ambiguity, not from truth. When you force clarity, you expose their manipulation. Here's why this works so beautifully. Manipulators count on you filling in the blanks with your own fears and insecurities. They say something vague, and your mind immediately creates the worst possible scenario. You assume people are saying terrible things. You assume everyone thinks you're incompetent. You assume your attitude is somehow offensive. But when you ask for clarification, you're refusing to participate in their game. You're saying, "I won't supply the fear you want me to feel. I won't create the drama you want to see. I won't assume the worst without evidence." You're handing them the responsibility for their own words. Let me give you a workplace example. Your boss says, "There have been some concerns about your performance." This is classic corporate manipulation. It's vague enough to create anxiety, but specific enough to sound serious. Most people would immediately apologize, promise to improve, or ask what they did wrong. Instead, you calmly say, "Help me understand what concerns you're referring to." Now, your boss has to be specific. They have to name the actual concerns. They have to provide concrete examples. They have to articulate measurable standards. And if they can't, if the concerns are just manipulation to keep you anxious, they're exposed. Here's another example. A family member says, "I just don't think you care about us anymore." This is emotional manipulation designed to trigger guilt and defensive behavior. Instead of defending, instead of listing all the things you do, instead of getting emotional, you say, "Help me understand what makes you feel that way." Now they have to be specific. They have to explain exactly what behaviors led to that conclusion. They have to provide concrete examples of times you didn't care. And often, when forced to be specific, their accusation falls apart. Because it was never about specific behaviors, it was about emotional control. The psychological power of this response is extraordinary. Manipulators use vague language because it's impossible to defend against something that doesn't exist. You can't address concerns that aren't specified. You can't fix problems that aren't identified. You can't improve behaviors that aren't articulated. When you demand clarity, you're removing their primary weapon. You're forcing them into the light where their manipulation becomes visible. Marcus Aurelius taught, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This response embodies that principle perfectly. The vagueness that stands in your way becomes the way you expose their manipulation. The confusion they create becomes the confusion they must resolve. Epictetus said, "First learn the meaning of what you say, then speak." When you ask others to clarify their meaning, you're asking them to do what philosophers have always taught. Speak with intention, speak with clarity, speak with responsibility. This response is particularly effective in relationships because it's non-confrontational, yet incredibly powerful. Your partner says, "You never listen to me." Instead of defending, instead of arguing, instead of listing times you did listen, you say, "Help me understand what makes you feel like I don't listen." Now they have to be specific. They have to describe particular situations. They have to explain what behaviors make them feel unheard. And this opens door to genuine conversation instead of endless arguments. This response works because it changes the frame entirely. You're not arguing about who's right or who's wrong. You're seeking understanding. You're not defending your character or your intentions. You're requesting clarity. You're not participating in their emotional game. You're demanding rational conversation. Manipulators hate this because they can't manipulate someone who refuses to be emotional about vague accusations. They can't control someone who demands evidence instead of accepting fear. They can't intimidate someone who seeks understanding instead of seeking approval. Practice this response in all situations where someone uses vague language. When someone says, "People are talking," everyone thinks, "I'm just concerned." Some might say, your immediate response should be, "Help me understand what you mean by that." Watch how quickly manipulators back down. Watch how they try to change the subject. Watch how they become uncomfortable when asked for specifics. That's how you know you've disarmed them. That's how you know you've taken back your power. That's how you know you've mastered this third response. But we're not done yet. Wait until you see what response number 4 can do for you when dealing with aggressive dominance and intimidation tactics. This one will give you the ultimate defense against those who try to control you through fear. Response 4. I'll consider that and get back to you. This phrase is your ultimate defense against aggressive dominance, urgent demands, and pressure tactics. Some people try to control you by creating artificial urgency. They want immediate answers, instant decisions, rushed commitments. They know that pressure makes people vulnerable, that urgency leads to poor judgment, that speed prevents careful thought. When you say, "I'll consider that and get back to you," you're taking back control of your time, your decisions, your life. You're refusing to be rushed into something you might regret. This response is particularly powerful because it's polite, it's professional, it's reasonable. No one can argue with someone who wants to think carefully before making decisions. Imagine you're in a high-pressure sales situation. The salesperson says, "This offer expires today. You need to decide now. This is your last chance." They're creating false urgency to prevent you from thinking clearly. Instead of feeling pressured, instead of making rushed decisions, you remain calm, look them in the eyes and say, "I'll consider that and get back to you." Suddenly, all their pressure loses its power. They can't force you to decide immediately if you've politely refused to play their urgency game. Here's another example. Your boss calls you in, says they need you to take on an additional project. Start tomorrow, no discussion allowed. They're using their authority to rush you into commitments without proper consideration. Instead of saying yes out of fear, instead of arguing about boundaries, you say professionally, "I'll consider that and get back to you with my decision." Now you've taken back control of the conversation. You've refused to be pressured into immediate decisions. You've maintained your professional boundaries while being respectful. This works because it changes the power dynamic. They came expecting immediate compliance, but you gave them thoughtful consideration. They came expecting emotional reaction, but you gave them rational response. They came expecting power over you, but you showed them power over yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Time is like a river made up of the events which happen in a violent stream. For as soon as a thing has been seen, it is carried away, and another comes in its place." This response honors the wisdom of taking your time in that river of events. Instead of being swept away by urgency, you choose your moment to respond thoughtfully. Seneca taught us, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." When someone rushes you, they're trying to waste your time by preventing careful consideration. By saying you'll get back to them, you're protecting your most valuable resource, your ability to think clearly and decide wisely. The psychological power of this response is incredible. Aggressive people count on catching you off guard. They want you reacting instead of responding. They want you emotional instead of rational. They want you rushed instead of thoughtful. When you take your time, you're removing their primary advantage. You're showing them that your decisions are based on wisdom, not pressure. You're demonstrating that your boundaries are respected, not violated. You're proving that your autonomy cannot be compromised by their urgency. This response is especially effective in personal relationships. A partner says, "We need to decide about moving right now. We can't wait. This can't wait." Instead of making life-changing decisions under pressure, instead of fighting about timing, you say calmly, "I understand this is important, and I'll consider that and get back to you with my thoughts." Now you've created space for wise decisions instead of rushed reactions. You've maintained your relationship boundaries while being respectful. You've shown that important decisions deserve careful thought. Practice this response whenever someone tries to rush you. When they say, "I need an answer now. This can't wait. We have to decide today." Emergency situation. Your response should be, "I'll consider that and get back to you." Watch how people respect your boundaries when you're polite but firm. Watch how they stop trying to pressure you when they realize it doesn't work. Watch how they learn to give you space to make good decisions. That's the power of this fourth response. That's your defense against urgency-based manipulation. Response 5. That's interesting. Sometimes the most powerful response is the simplest one. Sometimes silence and curiosity are your greatest weapons. When someone attacks you, criticizes you, or tries to provoke you, they expect defense, arguments, emotional reactions. But when you simply say, "That's interesting," with genuine curiosity, you're refusing to give them the reaction they want. You're not agreeing, you're not disagreeing, you're not defending, you're not attacking, you're just observing. This response drives aggressive people crazy because they can't argue with curiosity. They can't fight someone who won't fight back. They can't manipulate someone who won't engage emotionally. Imagine someone says, "You're completely wrong about everything." Instead of defending, instead of arguing, instead of getting emotional, you tilt your head slightly, look thoughtful, and say simply, "That's interesting." Now what do? They expected a fight, but got curiosity. They expected emotion, but got observation. They expected engagement, but got detachment. They're left exposed and confused. Here's another example. Someone tries to provoke you with insult. Anyone who thinks like you is an idiot. Most people would immediately defend themselves, argue their position, or retaliate with insults. Instead, you maintain calm composure, perhaps raise an eyebrow slightly and say, "That's interesting." The power is in the simplicity. You're not giving them emotional satisfaction. You're not validating their attempt to hurt you. You're not participating in their drama. You're just observing their behavior with curiosity. This works because aggressive people need your emotional participation to feel powerful. When you refuse to give them that, their aggression loses its target. They're like someone shouting into empty space. Their words have nowhere to land, Marcus Aurelius taught. The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it. When someone attacks you, their words are just part of that universal change. Your response is what makes your life what it is. By responding with curiosity, you're choosing thoughts of observation instead of reaction. Epictetus said, "We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them." Someone's aggression is their external circumstance. Your response is your choice. That's interesting is the choice to observe rather than engage. The beauty of this response is its versatility. It works with insults, criticism, response 5. That's interesting. Sometimes the most powerful response is the simplest one. Sometimes silence and curiosity are your greatest weapons. When someone attacks you, criticizes you, or tries to provoke you, they expect defense, arguments, emotional reactions. But when you simply say, "That's interesting," with genuine curiosity, you're refusing to give them the reaction they want. You're not agreeing, you're not disagreeing, you're not defending, you're not attacking, you're just observing. This response drives aggressive people crazy because they can't argue with curiosity. They can't fight someone who won't fight back. They can't manipulate someone who won't engage emotionally. Imagine someone says, "You're completely wrong about everything." Instead of defending, instead of arguing, instead of getting emotional, you tilt your head slightly, look thoughtful, and say simply, "That's interesting." Now what do? They expected a fight but got curiosity. They expected emotion but got observation. They expected engagement but got detachment. They're left exposed and confused. Here's another example. Someone tries to provoke you with insult. Anyone who thinks like you is an idiot. Most people would immediately defend themselves, argue their position, or retaliate with insults. Instead, you maintain calm composure, perhaps raise an eyebrow slightly and say, "That's interesting." The power's in the simplicity. You're not giving them emotional satisfaction. You're not validating their attempt to hurt you. You're not participating in their drama. You're just observing their behavior with curiosity. This works because aggressive people need your emotional participation to feel powerful. When you refuse to give them that, their aggression loses its target. They're like someone shouting into empty space. Their words have nowhere to land. Marcus Aurelius taught, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." When someone attacks you, their words are just part of that universal change. Your response is what makes your life what it is. By responding with curiosity, you're choosing thoughts of observation instead of reaction. Epictetus said, "We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them." Someone's aggression is their external circumstance. Your response is your choice. That's interesting is the choice to observe rather than engage. The beauty of this response is its versatility. It works with insults, criticism, disagreements, even threats. In each case, you're refusing to give them what they want, your emotional reaction. You're maintaining your inner peace while they lose theirs. You're demonstrating emotional maturity while they show emotional weakness. You're exercising self-control while they demonstrate lack of control. Practice this response whenever someone tries to provoke you. When they insult you, criticize you, attack you, or try to intimidate you, your response should be, "That's interesting." Say it calmly with genuine curiosity, as if you're studying an interesting phenomenon. Watch how quickly people run out of ammunition when you won't fight back. Watch how they become uncomfortable when their aggression has no target. Watch how they respect you when they realize you can't be manipulated. That's the power of this fifth response. That's your ultimate defense against emotional warfare. Now you have all 5 responses, 5 powerful phrases that will silence anyone who tries to dominate, manipulate, or intimidate you. But before we conclude, let's talk about how to use these effectively together. Each response serves a specific purpose, a specific situation, a specific type of challenge. Response 1. I don't need to raise my voice to be right. Use this when someone tries to intimidate you through volume and aggression. Response 2. The way you speak says more about you than it does about me. Use this when someone attacks you with sarcasm, mockery, or contempt. Response 3. Help me understand what you mean by that. Use this when someone uses vague language to manipulate or confuse you. Response 4. I'll consider that and get back to you. Use this when someone tries to rush you with artificial urgency or pressure. Response 5. That's interesting. Use this when someone tries to provoke you with insults, attacks, or emotional triggers. These responses work because they're all based on the same Stoic principles: self-control, emotional intelligence, and strategic thinking. They're not about winning arguments. They're about maintaining your dignity. They're not about dominating others. They're about mastering yourself. They're not about creating conflict. They're about preventing it. Marcus Aurelius would be proud because these responses embody everything he taught about self-mastery and emotional discipline. Seneca would approve because these responses demonstrate wisdom, patience, and rational thinking in emotional situations. Epictetus would celebrate because these responses show perfect understanding of what we can control and what we cannot remember. Communication mastery isn't about having the right words. It's about having the right mindset. It's not about being clever. It's about being wise. It's not about winning conversations. It's about maintaining your character. Practice these responses until they become natural to you, until they become your automatic response to difficult situations, until you can say them with complete calm and absolute confidence. The more you use them, the more you'll notice people treating you differently. They'll become more respectful, more thoughtful, more careful in their interactions with you. They'll learn that you cannot be intimidated, manipulated, or provoked. They'll learn that you operate on a higher level of emotional intelligence and personal power. That's the ultimate goal, not just to silence others, but to elevate yourself to where their negativity can no longer reach you. Not just to win arguments, but to transcend them entirely. Not just to defend yourself, but to become so strong that defense becomes unnecessary. Before we go, I want to thank you for investing this time in your personal growth. These skills will serve you in every area of your life, in your career, in your relationships, in your personal development. They'll help you navigate difficult conversations with grace and wisdom. They'll help you maintain your peace in chaotic situations. They'll help you command respect without demanding attention. Now I have a question for you. Which of these 5 responses resonates most with you? Which situation do you face most often where one of these responses could make a difference? Share in the comments below because your experience helps others in our community learn and grow. And if you found value in this video, make sure to subscribe to Stoic Ocean and hit that notification bell. We create content designed to help you master yourself, improve your communication, and live with greater wisdom and peace. Your support helps us reach more people who need these messages of empowerment and personal growth. Remember, true power doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from controlling yourself. True strength doesn't come from being louder. It comes from being wiser. True respect doesn't come from demanding attention, it comes from earning it through character. These 5 responses are your tools for demonstrating that power, that strength, that character. Use them wisely. Use them consistently. Use them with confidence. And watch how your world begins to change when you change how you respond to it. This has been Stoic Ocean, where we help you master the art of living wisely. Until next time, stay strong, stay calm, and stay in control of your responses. Because in the end, that's what truly defines your character and shapes your destiny. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.